Olive. Last
Just a
time,
second.
the Rebbe spoke to us on this.
Just a second. I wanna
Please.
set up the,
What?
the
You want to queue up?
yeah.
Okay. Bloomer Rappaport, Sylvia Yaffe, Esther Wax, Esther Bela. Hello, Esther Bela. Shuli Birnbaum. I don't know who you are, Shuli Birnbaum. Why don't you show your face? Hello, Mrs. Yaffe.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello.
Who said hi, Rabbi? Was that Esther?
It's me.
Esther. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Esther. Hi. Oh, a special guest. Here we go. Did you all get copies online of what we're learning?
Mrs. Cohn WhatsApped me. It's actually from the Gutnick Chumash, correct?
Yes, whatever, yes. There's two things. There are two things included. One is from the Gutnick Chumash and one is from the Parsha. Okay, here we go. There we go. That's it. So this is for Parsha Matas Maseh. A very interesting Parsha, full of a lot of very extraordinary, moving incidents. Only one of which we're really going to discuss in any detail. But the idea is, in general structure, in this general structure of the Torah, we are now completing the Torah as it was given to Moshe on Mount Sinai, the first 4 books of the Torah. The 5th book of the Torah is from Moshe. It was taught in the last month of his life, beginning Rosh Chodesh Shvat. And he taught it for 5 weeks until Zion Adar, and that was the end of Moshe's verbal teaching of the Torah. But his teaching of the Torah continues to the present day because every idea that we will discover in the Torah was revealed to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Now here's a question for you to think over. I'm not going to discuss it now, but somebody once said to me, how is it possible that the Torah was revealed on Mount Sinai when the Torah describes things that didn't happen until after Mount Sinai? I want you to think about that, and next week you'll come back and tell me what conclusions you came to. Discuss it and see if you can figure out an answer that sits well in your heart and that you could answer to somebody else. Someone asked me that question and I answered them and they were not satisfied with my answer. So I'm giving over to you. You should come up with an answer that would be satisfying to somebody else. I kept on asking. And we'll discuss it next week. Got that? It's all right? Okay, all right. So we now complete the first 4 books of the Torah, which you might say, suggest number 4 always suggests right away, when you hear the number 4, right away you think of the 4 what? The 4 mothers. Okay, well, this is the Machon. I think of the 4, I think of mothers. Think of the 4 mothers, a lot of other 4s in our Jewish awareness, such as the Pesach Seder, the 4 sons, 4 cups of wine. You think of mothers, I think of sons, you see. When you get married, you'll think of sons.
4 questions?
4 questions, right. Famous episode of the Spy when the Yetzer Hara stole the 4 questions. And there's a wonderful drawing by Al Jaffe of the 4 questions in a tent, all tied up and gagged, and waiting to be rescued by the spy. You don't know who the spy is?
Rabbi Pape, that was a fantastic article. That Rabbi, about Mr. Shalfi.
Al Jaffe. Jaffe is almost like Yaffe. That's why you like the article. It had almost had your name in it.
No, it was a beautiful article.
Anyway, 4 letters of the name of God. How about chapter 1, Tanya? The 4 elements. 4 elements, right? Fire, water, air, earth. And their associated feelings. By the way, today is the yard site of the Ramak, the head of the Mekubalim in Sfas. When the Arizal arrived, he was the Rebbe, the Ramak, Reb Moshe Cordovero from Cordova in Spain, misplanted because of the Inquisition to Israel, perhaps through Istanbul, through Turkey, and up in Sfas, head of the Mekubalim. He wrote a book, I was told, I didn't learn it yet, somebody told me, called Tamar Devora, in which he explains our behavior, how to emulate Hashem. It's the mitzvah of the Torah, to learn from Hashem. The same way Hashem is merciful, we have to be merciful. The same way Hashem is kind. Hashem visits the sick. Hashem teaches Torah. We have to emulate. Hashem accompanies wayfarers. We have to learn from Hashem. So he learns all the things, the good qualities we can learn from in our behavior according to, hi Karen, welcome, how to behave. And he teaches them according to the spheres, what each sphere corresponds to, so that we can behave like Hashem in our day-to-day life. And the person who told me this said it's not a hard book, it's not hard to learn. Tamar Devora, and it's translated into English. It's available by the Ramak, whose yard site is today. Okay, so now in terms of the whole structure of the Torah, from the book of Bereshit, we learn about the beginnings, the creation, the great tzaddikim from the beginning of time, who bring us to Avraham. Rashi compares it to somebody who loses a pearl in the sand. He has to sift through all the sand in order to discover the pearl. So we move quickly through the generations till we come to Avraham, and then we slow down and start discussing his life, and then the life of Yitzchak, and then in even greater detail, the life of Yaakov and his children, and then brings us down to Egypt. And then we discuss in one chapter the servitude in Egypt, and then the arrival of Moshe Rabbeinu on the scene with the plagues, and the destruction of the might of Egypt and the liberation of the Jewish people, the crossing of the Red Sea, each a chapter in its own right. And then we come to Har Sinai. By now, the Jewish people have received a lot of mitzvahs. They've become a nation. They've grown into a nation, and they've started receiving mitzvahs. By the time they get to Har Sinai, they have already received the laws called dinim, laws between man and man, Shabbos. And then they come to Har Sinai, Yisro shows up, and we have the giving of the Torah, all in this book, in the book of Shemais, followed by the instructions of what to do once we have the Torah, building the Mishkan. 4 chapters about building the Mishkan. The building, the clothing, the vessels, and then the actual doing of it. And then towards the end also, this disastrous story of the golden calf. Which is then repeated again in Bamidbar, a book and a half later, with the story of the spies. So what should have happened after the golden calf happened. We didn't bring it on ourselves one way, so we finished off the job with the spies. So we don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, Chas v'Sholom, and they didn't go into Eretz Yisrael. And then finally, we have a whole, then after that comes a whole book of explanation of the laws and the details of the service in the base of Mikdash and other important dinim in the book of Vayikra, book of Leviticus, the laws, practical laws about what should be done in the Mishkan. Now we have a Mishkan, what do we do in it? The whole book about what we do in it, basically. And then finally we get to Bamidbar, taking the Mishkan through the desert. And now we complete the book of Bamidbar, which brings us to the border of Israel. Yarden Yereche, we're on the border of Yarden Yereche, which is symbolic of being on the threshold of Geula. And then we enter, and then Moshe teaches one last time the whole Torah again, which is crucial. We'll discuss that next week because it's so important that Moshe taught it again. That's the fifth book of the Torah. The first book of the Torah, Moshe, is a microphone. So again, the question, how could he be a microphone for things that didn't even happen yet? But he is a microphone. Hashem is speaking. Hashem is speaking to us. Now let the cat out of the bag. That's why it's so important, the fifth book of the Torah, that Moshe is speaking to us. So it comes through human intellect, because if not, the whole of the Torah would be dogma. There would be no room for us to think about it, or to explore within it, or to make discovery in it of new ideas, which we would just have to accept it exactly as it is. But no, it comes from Moshe's intellect and Moshe's feelings, and they are prophetic feelings and prophetic insight, and anything that Moshe says, Hashem is saying, he's saying with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, but it's a human being that's saying it. That's the fifth book of the Torah. So that's where we are. We're on the border of the Jordan, the Jewish people. Moshe is about to leave us physically, and which will happen at the end of the fifth book of the Torah, when he finishes teaching the one more time. And the Jewish people are ready to enter the Holy Land. The new generation, the generation that went out of Egypt, are all gone. They all perished. 40 years later, 40 years for the 40 days that they explored Israel, and they came back and said, we don't want to go in. So Hashem said, okay, you don't have to. A year for a day, a year for a day. That's what you got. 40 years in the wilderness. And now we've come to the end of that. We're ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. So it's very much appropriate to today, because that's where we are today. We are on the threshold of the Geula today. And expecting that these days will be transformed from 3 weeks into the the greatest holidays in the Jewish calendar. So that's Maseh. Now, Maseh is the journeys of the Jewish people, which represents a very important idea there. There are 40, Maseh details 42 journeys that the Jewish people took. And the Baal Shem Tov taught that these 42 journeys are symbolic of the 42 journeys of our life, every individual person's life, and the 42 journeys of the Jewish nationhood, of the history of the Jewish people. And symbolically, in their time, the original 42 journeys, why the question is asked and it's answered in Hasidus. Why is it that the Jewish people had to go through these 40 journeys? It wasn't just a punishment. There was a reason for it. They had to take the Mishkan with the luches in it. The luches were given by God. And the writing was godly writing. And they contained within them the whole Torah. A wilderness is a place where nobody lives there. It says, what is a wilderness? A wilderness is a place geographically where there's no rain. If there's no rain, nobody lives there. Did you know that Antarctica is a wilderness? Because it never rains in the Antarctica. Whereas in the Arctic is not a wilderness. The Antarctica is a land area where there is no rain. So it's literally, it qualifies as a desert. It's a desert of snow, but it's a desert. Okay, so why did the Jewish people have to go 40 years through the desert, taking the Mishkan with the luches, with the Aaron, with the tablets of the law in it? Because if people don't live there, who lives there? Snakes and scorpions and wild animals and evil spirits. This is where all the Yetzer Hara henchmen hang out. So the Jewish people had to take the ark with the luches through 42 stages of the wilderness to subdue the power of the what they're called chitzonim, superfluous, extraneous forces, negative forces, where people cannot live, negative forces, anti-life forces live. I'm not going to get into politics. This is one of the great themes of Masai. Now, Matos, let's take a look at this first paragraph here. What does the Rebbe say? Let me find my glasses. With Parshas Matas Masai, we complete the book of Bamidbar, and we say at the completion, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis Chazek. And the children in school say, my mother made a chocolate cake. Chazak means strength. When you say a thing 3 times, it gives it, it's called a chazaka. When you do a thing 3 times, like a girl comes to Mahon, she likes candles, wonderful. Maybe she'll come back next week. Okay, she came a second week. Whoa. Maybe she'll come a third week. Everybody's hoping and praying she'll stay a third week, because if she stays a third week, that means she really made it. She's here. The good chance she'll keep on and on and on and on. After I kept Shabbos 3 times, I called up the shaliach that I had met, and he didn't know that I'd kept Shabbos on his suggestion. He had no clue. And I told him I'd kept Shabbos 3 times, and I was thinking it might be a wonderful experience to keep it together with the community who are keeping Shabbos. Would it be possible to come? I thought he'd say, yeah, sure. What did he say? With typical British understatement, I think it could be arranged. That was his reply. I'll never forget it. And he didn't take me into his own home. He sent me to another home, which was number 13 Fursby Road in London, Stamford Hill. I said, oh, 13. That's like bar mitzvah. I was very excited to come to house number 13. And I came in and there was this lady, formerly from Russia, a Jewish lady, who invited me to come in, go down a few steps into their kitchenette, where there was a table, and she served me tea and a little bit of mezainis, cake. I didn't know what mezainis was. Cake, I ate it. And her husband came in. And I said, she introduced me to her husband. His name, Rabbi Raskin, brother of David Raskin. His son is the Dayan today, Dayan Raskin. His son was 12 years old at the time. On Purim, he put on his sister's skirt and dressed up like a Scot. 12 years old. His father asked him on Shabbos to recite for me a page of Gemara. He thought I would be very impressed. I was, sort of. But I said to myself, I guess any kid could learn something by heart. But he became a big Dayan. He was a very bright kid. We're good friends to the present day. So I said to his father, I want to ask you a question. He said, yes. I said, I kept Shabbos the last 3 weeks, and now I've come here. My question is that each week was more exciting, more intense, more exhilarating than the week before. So this is my question. Does it keep going like that? Or does it sort of level out? Do you plateau? I didn't know the word plateau yet. They taught it to me when my wife fell ill. Anyway, he just looked at me, cocked his head, lifted an eyebrow. Was his answer. I took it to mean you're going to have to find that one out for yourself, Booker. So 3 times means you really did it. That's called a chazaka. And when we finish a book, the word chazak means strength. We say chazak, chazak, when this chazak, let us be strengthened to go on to more. This Shabbos is also the middle of the 3 weeks when we are mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. So this seems to be a contradiction because the 3 weeks is a time of sorrow, weakness. That implies weakness. So which is it? Is it strength or weakness? We have to resolve this question. So now to understand that, the Rebbe wants to talk about the title of the Parsha with the explaining the idea that the Rebbe brings many occasions, that the title of a Parsha contains the theme of the Parsha. And the Torah is very accurate, very extraordinarily accurate, amazingly accurate. How is it possible to always come up with a title that contains everything that's in the following verses and chapters? So how does the word matos sum up what's coming after? And the Rebbe explains this idea, by the way, is a very central idea about the meaningfulness of every word in the Torah, of the divine revelation that it is. And really, that was one of the things that really influenced me when I first came to Chabad, and I saw that there was this attitude about it, about the authority of the Torah. It made so much sense. Because I was studying literature, and it just fit in very much with what I was discovering in the area of literature. Only there wasn't any room for wavering. So he says here, the word mata means 2 things. It means a stick, like a staff, a staff of leadership, yeah. But it also means a branch, like a branch of a tree. And it implies strength. A staff is strong. Now, there's another word for a branch, which is shvat. The word shvat, shevet. Shevet is a branch. Shevet is also a tribe. The shvatim are tribe, the 12 tribes. But there's a difference between a mata, which is a stick, and a shevet, which is a branch. The difference is that the branch is still connected to the tree. It's alive. And as long as it's connected to the tree, it's pliable. It can bend. and it can grow. But if it's detached from the tree, it's no longer living, but it's not pliable, but it's strong. When you have to beat a dog, you use a stick, you don't use a branch. You want to encourage a horse, use a branch. Break off a branch, give the horse a little schmeiss. But if you really want to beat someone, heaven forbid, you're going to use a stick. Okay. The stick is strong. And that's why a leader has a stick. It's a sign of his strength. And the king has a scepter. Okay. And the Rebbe speaks about this. There's a difference between a staff and a stick. He explains it in different ways, in different sikhas. He explains this many, many times. That the idea of a staff, of a branch, when a stick is a branch, it's pliable. And that's like the idea of journeys, of Maseh. Maseh is journeys, means journeys, the 42 journeys. Because a journey, the 42 journeys that the Jewish people took were an extension of the journey number 1. The journey number 1 was leading to journey number 42, which would bring them to the promised land, to Eretz HaKodesh. And every journey along the way was another stage in the exodus from Egypt, because Egypt is your limitations. So the achievement of one journey becomes the Egypt, the limitation that you can't stay there. You have to now make your next journey and continue to grow. What gives you the strength, says the Rebbe in one sikha on this subject, what gives a person the strength to persevere through all these challenges and to continue growing, challenge after challenge after challenge, is the idea of the stick is planted in your soul before you start all the journeys. That strength is planted in you to go through all the journeys to get to the end, which is represented by the stick. The strength. To go through all the journeys till you come to a total point, a position of great strength. And that's the interconnection between matais, which is the stick, and maseh, which is the journeys. So here he says it this way. And again, he says, it's a contradiction. How are we going to resolve the contradiction? The Rebbe often takes this approach in Torah learning, to look for the contradiction and to resolve the two contradictory themes seem to be working together. How do we resolve them? It's a very common theme in the style of the Rebbe's analysis of the Torah. So last paragraph here on page 164, the strength represented by Parshas Mates, in which Moshe transmits a commandment of Hashem. So the strength is Moshe giving over commandments. That's a strength from above, because the commandments are Hashem's commandments, and you got to do them. Moshe is giving them over. No one is going to stand in the way of Hashem's commandments. Every paroi is going to fall by the side. Okay. Whereas Maseh is a different kind of strength. Maseh is the strength of growing, whereby we elevate the world. In other words, when the soul, I'm going to say elsewhere, when the soul is in Gan Eden, it's close to Hashem, it has great strength, it has Hashem's strength. But then the soul comes down into this world, which it doesn't experience in Gan Eden. In this world, you're confronted with challenges, with Yetzer Hara, with temptations, with obstacles that prevent you, and a Yetzer Hara that deceives you and fools you and tricks you into making a mistake. But that challenge comes in order for you to grow. Like when you finally make it to the Machon and you get there on your first day and it's snowing and you don't have boots and you come to the front door and it's locked. Are you going to persevere or are you going to go home? Yesh v'yesh. So the challenges enable you to grow. And when you grow, you elevate the challenge, because now the challenge is part of your growth. The challenge, which was negative, now became positive. So he says the strength of Masai is to eliminate the opposition and overcome it. That's the challenge. And to grow and to transform the challenge into something positive, into something holy. Now he applies this theme of strength and growth, internal strength, moving from strength through challenges to a deeper strength, where strength has been ratified, challenged and ratified. Like, if you own a house and someone comes and says, "What are you doing in my house?" You say, "I bought it." "Where's your deed?" "I lost it." "Well, you never had it. It's mine. I have a deed. This is my house. Get out of my house." You go to court. There's no, "I bought it." And you do your research and you get your lawyers and you go to court, and the court says, "You're right. It is your house." So your deed was challenged, and now it's been ratified. Now it's much stronger. Now no one can challenge it. So the result of all the challenges is that now you can't be challenged. Whereas when the neshama comes down into the world, it's very holy, but it can be challenged. It can be even thrown down like like Adam Arishon. So now he applies this to the idea of the Beis Hamikdash, which was destroyed. This is the 3 weeks, right? So the purpose of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was to reach the greatness and the perfection, further greatness and greater perfection in the third Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash had to be destroyed. The second one had to be destroyed in order to build the third one. We said that last week. The first Beis Hamikdash was built according to the commandments of God. The second Beis Hamikdash was rebuilt through the strength of man. Each one has its own advantage. The second one, since it came from mankind, and it was also destroyed, but it was greater, it was bigger, and it lasted longer by 10 more years, 420 years instead of 410. First Beis Hamikdash lasted 410 years. Second Beis Hamikdash lasted 420 years. That's total of 800 and, come on, who's listening? 430. And 70 years of exile in between, total of what? 900 years. Where was New York 900 years ago? We have to appreciate that we had a Beis Hamikdash for 900 years. Plus 40 years in the wilderness, 38 years in the wilderness, 369 years of the Mishkan before the first Beis Hamikdash was built. 1,200 years. 1,200 years we had Hashem's presence, home, the Mishkan, Mikdash in our midst. 2,000 years we have not had it. It's overdue. Okay? So even when the Beis Hamikdash stood the second time, so the first one had a weakness because it was only from God. So therefore it didn't have the strength to endure. This is telling me that I have to go to Ma'ariv. But that's another night. So it didn't endure. And the second temple, since it was built by man, it had a greatness to it because it had human effort. Human effort is always greater than what Hashem just gives us. But it also didn't last because it was missing. There were 5 things that were missing. Didn't have the Aaron, didn't have the Luchais. I don't think it had the Mun. the staff of Aaron, the 5 things that were hidden didn't come back. And so because it had this weakness, it too was destroyed. But in the third Beis Hamikdash, last lines on page 165, the purpose of the destruction, the 3 weeks, in this Shabbos we received extra strength to serve Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs, through which we'll reach the eternal redemption, the third Beis Hamikdash, which will never be destroyed. Now, another thing we have to speak about here on page 166, turn the page, very important, worthy of mention, is that we're going to bench on Shabbos the new month, which is the month of Menachem Av, and the first day of the new month is the only yard site that's mentioned in the Torah, which is explicitly mentioned in the Torah, is the yard site of Aaron HaKohen. And Aaron HaKohen, about him it says that he, Ohev Sholem, he made peace between people. He loved people. So therefore he deserved to be Kohen, because a Kohen has to bless people. And he brought people together. How did he do that? When he saw people were quarreling, he would make sholem between them. He would tell each one that the other one really didn't mean it. The other one was really sorry. He said, I don't believe you. No, he says, no, really, would I lie to you? He really is sorry. He really wants to make up with you. And then we go to the other guy and say the same thing. So they both thought that the other one was ready to accept them. And so then when they met, they weren't at loggerheads. And he made sholem between them. And he made sholem between husband and wife. In the same way, he did marriage counselor. How do you make sholem between husband and wife? You go to Mrs. Pape.
About friends,
What?
Like you say, okay, but then when the friends meet and they're like, okay, like, you want to be sorry or something? They're like, no, you are really sorry. And like, no, like it always happens. Like they for sure would figure out that like Aaron told each other that they,
No, because deep down they really want to get back together. They were friends in the first place and they want to be friends again. They would both like to be friends, but I can't be friends. He was so nasty to me. How can I be friends with him after what he said, what he did? Behind my back, what he did? How can I be friends with him? So Aaron would come and say, he's really sorry. And then when they meet, one of them will take the initiative and say, you know, Jaime, I'm really sorry that I said to you what I did. I wish we could be friends again. And Jaime will say, yeah, me too. That's the way it works. It's the way it works. I'm telling you, when the Rebbe was sick, my in-law, my sister-in-law's father-in-law said, people have to make sholem. The Rebbe's health depends on this. Anybody has a quarrel with somebody else, they have to go through the discomfort of apologizing. Doesn't matter who's right. We're not here to be right. We're here to bring Mashiach. So I took him seriously. There were, in fact, 2 people at that point in my life who were not speaking to me. And I went over to both of them. And in one case, I felt that I had offended him. In the other case, I felt he had offended me. First. And then I offended him back. But he did it first. So I went over and I said, you know, I'm sorry. And we became best friends. I was amazed. And we remain best friends whenever I see him. It's a very, very warm relationship. And the other one also, we became very good friends. And now I understand he's not well. He should have refuah shalema. But it works. It really works. And that's what's required now, especially in the 3 weeks. That's what it means to behave with Ahavas Yisrael. There's somebody who wrinkles their nose at you. Speak to your mashpi about it. Why did they do that? And what should you do about it? The Rebbe used that expression, wrinkles his nose. So Aaron, when Aaron passed on, it says there were 80,000 people who accompanied him, who mourned for him by the name of Aaron. Can you imagine? Because how busy Aaron was making shalom between husbands and wives, that they would be arguing and ready to separate, and he would make shalom between them, and they would get back together and have a child. And they say, you know what? The reason we had this child is because of Aaron. Let's call the baby Aaron. There's a story I just heard recently. I've heard it before. There was a woman who was stopped by a policeman, and he said, let me see your license. And she took out her thing. She had a picture of the Rebbe in her wallet. And the policeman said, this is your rabbi? She said, yes. He said, I used to accompany him. I used to be part of the police escort when he would go to the cemetery. And, you know, one time, one of the boys who also would accompany me was speaking with me. And I told him I was married 10 years, never had any children. She said, well, why don't you ask a blessing from the rabbi? I said, you can do that? I'm not Jewish. He says, of course you can do that. When the rabbi comes back to the car, hold the door open for him and tell him, ask him for a blessing. He says, so I did. And that year, my wife had a baby boy, and we called him Menachem Mendel. and my parents were very opposed to the name because they said, you're going to send him to school, and the other boys are going to pick on him and call him a Jew. He said, good. Let him know that you shouldn't be prejudiced against Jews. And let him teach his friends that you have to be friendly with Jews. And there you go. So 80,000 people called their children Aaron. And they all came out to mourn for Aaron. Now, Moshe brought, in his merit, the Jewish people had food. The mon came down for 40 years in the merit of Moshe. And they had water in the merit of who? Miriam, right. And the clouds of glory were in the merit of Aaron. Now, food and drink, water, are internal things, and they correspond to the level of godliness that we learned about, which is the godliness that fills everything with life. Mamale kol almi. But clouds surround the whole camp. They correspond to a higher level of godliness called soiviv kol almi, right? And the clouds of glory were in the merit of Aaron. His love of peace and his loving manner of bringing people close to the Torah came from his emphasis on the unity of the Jewish people that is higher than any levels, higher than any divisions, okay? And the special mitzvah given to Aaron and to all his children after him, it's not given to anybody else, is Birkas Kohanim, to bless people, which unites, and blessing also unites two opposites, like Matas Mase, again, the opposites, that it's a blessing, it brings down from above, and it's a prayer, it elevates from below, because prayer is what we do, right? Like the difference between Choni Amagal. Choni Amagal prayed for rain, he drew a circle around himself and said, Master of the universe, I'm not moving from this circle until you send rain. And it didn't get it right. A few drops came down, then it came, he said, I mean rain, not drops. Then it poured. He says, it was going to flood. He said, I mean rain people can benefit from, not it's going to destroy everything. And finally it rained. So he brought rain with his prayer, but it took a few tries. When they came to the same scenario with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he learned a mimer. He said a mimer, and it rained. So this shows the superior quality of learning Torah that brings things from above. That's the idea of learning. And when a kohen gives you a bracha, you should be well, you should have a child, whatever, that's from above. And this unification is whatever. So now, during the 3 weeks with the yahrzeit of Aaron, this should bring out in us to be the students of Aaron, loving peace, pursuing peace, loving the creations, and bringing them closer to the Torah. Now, siyumim, we see here, the last chapter here on page 167 is about making siyumim in the 9 days. Where the Rebbe said we have to serve God with joy. During these 9 days, we're not supposed to serve God with joy in certain areas. We're not supposed to, during 9 days, we're not supposed to listen to music. We're not supposed to buy new clothes. We're not supposed to make weddings. And so therefore the Rebbe said, wherever it's possible to do something that brings happiness, we should seize the opportunity. So if there's a bris, we should go to the bris. If there's a Pidyon Ben, we should go. And a siyum is a joyous occasion. When you finish a book of the Torah, or like when we bring the Torah and dedicate a new Torah, we make a whole parade, and dancing. So the Rebbe said we should make a siyum every day of the 9 days. We should make a siyum, and you can hear these online, COL or 770 live at 9:45 probably after Ma'ariv every night. You can hear a siyum and participate in it. The Rebbe says in other groups they actually wash and eat meat. We don't eat meat during the 9 days except on Shabbos. But at a siyum you could eat meat. We don't do it. We just go to the siyum, say l'chaim, verbring. So the Rebbe emphasized that we should make siyumim, and through the merit of the siyumim, that we should transform the 9 days into days of real celebration with the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So I told you why did I bring two sets of sheets? Because there's something so interesting in the second set, but we're running out of time. We've pretty much run out of time, I think. Yeah, that's it. However, let me just quickly look through this. So the first here, the name of the parsha, the first page in the second set is a very interesting and very clear discussion, continuation of discussion that we had about the idea of Shvatim and Matas, the difference between them. The Rabbi brings it out very clearly and from a different angle. And now here, let me read this with you on the second page about anger and forgetfulness. Very, very interesting. From the Arizal. The Arizal's yahrzeit, by the way, is the 5th day of Av, which is in the 9 days. And I've mentioned often in class that on the 5th day of Av, the Rebbe said everybody should go to the holy place where the Arizal remains in Sfas, visit him on his yahrzeit. And so that was in 1975. I was newly married, and Tzach in Israel supplied buses, and I went and I sat beside a young man. I mentioned this all the time in class, who told me that he had yechidus with the Rebbe. He was about to move. He moved to Israel. He was a dental assistant, and he set up a practice in Kfar Chabad. Like, he was the guy in the back room who made the dentures for the dentist. And he told the Rebbe that he was a Baal Tshuva. He was fasting on Mondays and Thursdays because he wanted to be holy. And the Rebbe got very upset with him, and he wished he kept his mouth shut. He was very sorry that he even mentioned it. So the Rebbe said, don't you know that the Alter Rebbe is opposed to individuals fasting? You only fast when there's a public fast day together with everybody else. Because, and the Alter Rebbe brings 2 reasons, and we just read them in Igeres HaTshuva. because it weakens you and you cannot learn Torah properly. So that's a sin. And it makes you proud, which is worse than any sin. Adam HaRishon was proud, and that's why he ate from the fruit. He was tricked by the snake to eat from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So the Rebbe saw, he was very crestfallen because Rebbe was scolding him. The Rebbe didn't want him to go out feeling that he'd been scolded. So Rebbe sort of smiled and said, but if you wish to continue in this mode of service of God, I could suggest something to you, which is whenever you eat, choose one item on the plate that you really enjoy and leave over a spoonful. You don't have to fast a whole day. Eat your proper meal, but leave over one spoonful. He turned to me, he said, it's easier to fast a whole day. But you want to be a Baal Nefesh, to control yourself. That's how you do it. So the Arizal, since you mentioned the Arizal, whenever I mention the Arizal, I always mention that story. The Arizal considered anger and pride go together, right? We learned the first parak of Tanya, anger and pride from Yisoid HaEsh, from the element of fire, is more serious than all the other sins. Because when a person is angry, it's like he's worshiping an idol. Doesn't believe in God. When you get angry, you're denying the presence of God. And when a person is angry, his soul departs from his body and is replaced by an external soul. And this is why when a person gets angry, we find in the Torah that a person forgets his Torah learning through becoming angry because of the departure of his soul. And then the Rebbe adds another comment they bring another comment from the letter of the Rebbe with regard to the question of a temper, especially when we're speaking about getting angry. This weakness can be controlled. How can you learn to control your anger? So I told you the story last week about the woman from who, when she was engaged, she wanted to not go through with her marriage because she says she's a hot-tempered person and her husband's going to find out after they get married. He doesn't realize it now, but he's going to divorce me. I don't want to get divorced. So the Rebbe said, when you have children, you'll learn patience. In the meantime, I suggest you work in a hospital and try and do volunteer work and try and work in the department of newly born children. You'll learn patience that way. Now the Rebbe says here, speaking of anger, you can control your anger through a verse from Tehillim, Shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid, I placed Hashem before me all the time, says David HaMelech. The image of God is constantly before my eyes. And this is also brought in the very first lines of the Shulchan Aruch. So it's an introduction to the entire code of Jewish behavior in your day-to-day life by reflecting upon the fact that one is always at every moment in the presence of Hashem. And to do this, it helps to think about every morning the idea that Hashem is creating the world out of nothing every single second. So therefore, you're in the presence of Hashem every single second. And how can you do that? By looking up. So look up high and behold. Especially here on President Street, you see the clouds over how this is magnificent. And a person should always have this idea that he's standing in the presence of Hashem. And if you're standing in the presence of Hashem, how can you be angry? How do you dare behave with anger? A friend of mine, famous David Lazarson, famous, described when he started teaching, his teaching career, he's about tshuva. He went to Morristown, and then he went to the university and he got a teacher's degree, got a PhD in teaching, Dr. Laz. And they sent him to teach in an inner city school. And one of his early days there, he comes out into the schoolyard and he sees two people killing each other. One has the other in a headlock. And he says, "What's going on here?" So they freeze.
Yeah.
And one looks up at the rabbi and says, "Where's dancing, Rabbi?" Teacher, where's dancing, teacher? In other words, as soon as they're in presence of the teacher, they stop fighting. So if we think that we're in the presence of Hashem, we're not angry. You know, when the teacher comes into the room, we stop fighting. Remember, always in the presence of Hashem. Read through these pages together. They're very interesting, very, to say the least. It's the whole story of here about the Menashe and the daughters of Tzlafchad, which is also part of this parsha, about how they came and demanded a portion in the land of Israel, because they loved the land of Israel very, very much, and they didn't see a reason why they should be denied just because their father didn't have any children, any sons. He had 5 daughters, he didn't have any sons. And Moshe, in his humility, said, "I don't know." He asked Hashem. Rashi says, "Happy is the person who can rely on being able to ask Hashem and get an answer." We can have the same privilege. Ask the Rebbe, you'll also get an answer. It's true, you will. These days should be transformed into days of the biggest holidays, biggest happiness, greatest happiness. And we will bless. The Rebbe said when he was 3 years old, he yearned for the time when we were able to say, "Thank you, Hashem, that you afflicted me." We will bless our afflictions when we see the reward. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Highlight of my day,
Wow.
week.
Oh.